think if America was able to transport this love of unreality to foreign policy, it might actually be a good thing. Instead of trying to impose a certain truth, it would be comfortable with different civilizational truths, and it would be trying to keep a balance between them. What kind of puzzles me, surprises me about the current moment is that in American politics, everything is open for grabs, really from the far left to the far right, and no one really takes anything for granted anymore. The consensus is very thin and disappearing. But then when you turn to foreign policy, there's a very thick substratum of values that are lectured to the rest of the world. It's become really quite extraordinary, particularly if you look at Mike Pompeo. His whole tenure has been an illustration of this contradiction, where he's still, when talking to the rest of the world, adopting the same traditional tropes, the sacred role of journalists in protecting a free society. And then in American politics, obviously things don't work like that anymore. Journalists are described as a depraved class, and so on and so forth. So clearly, one of two things has to happen. Either America goes back in its domestic politics to the very strong centrist liberal consensus that it projects outwards, or its foreign policy is going to become more like its domestic politics, where it's going to be much more open to different paths and different ways to organize society. It might not be a bad thing. And I think it's a kind of ironic America that doesn't take things too seriously. It might be a more constructive America, because right now what we have is a number of powers that actually take their civilizational evangelical role very seriously, starting with China. And what the approach here is, do you fight China's evangelical approach, which, I've written in my book on the Belt and Road. And it's very striking. Many people still don't think that China has this approach of converting the whole world to its values, but it does. And it's openly said, more often in Mandarin than in English. How do you fight this Chinese evangelical approach? There's a contradiction, China and evangelical. How do you do this? Do you fight it with your own evangelical approach? Or do you fight it with a more ironic approach where the concern is to limit Chinese power, not to convert China to your model?